What's up, everybody? Just wanted to do an update video. Last video I said that I wasn't going to put the S&S V111 in this year, and as you can see, I just couldn't wait. So kind of just wanted to focus this video on the V111 instead of going over parts and other stuff on the bike, just because I think everybody's up to speed on that if you've been watching any of the other videos. But here it is. It's an S&S V111. It is the complete motor. It's got a 585 cam, super stock ignition. Just kept the carburetor on that came with it, the S&S Super E. I did add a Carlini torque arm. I wanted to talk about the motor specifically though, because I know there's some people out there that absolutely love it, some that prefer Ultimas, some that have had some bad experiences with S&S, and so on and so forth. So full disclosure, when I received this motor from Dirty Customs, that's DIRTYCUSTOMZ.com, unfortunately during transit when it was shipped, it was damaged by UPS. So it was a bit of a long process, not because of Dirty Customs and not because of S&S. It was dealing with UPS was a not fast experience. Eventually it did get replaced. Frankie with Dirty Customs is just, anybody that is into FXRs knows Frankie and knows he's the best to work with. And I'll tell you what, he went above and beyond anytime that I can. I'm going to support that business, and that's without really knowing the guy. I live in Illinois, he's in Arizona. He's just got all the right stuff, gets it to you as fast as possible, and if there's ever any kind of an issue, he's going to do everything he can to make it right. And what more can you ask for? But anyway, it did all get resolved, mostly due to his efforts. And then so this one arrived and it got put in, and it's absolutely awesome. I was really worried because I've heard some things about S&S motors, especially recently, and I'd have to say that that's the exception, not the rule, because this thing is fantastic. It is really quick, really powerful, runs really smooth. The thing that I noticed about it is that I like probably the most is that when I'm kind of just riding normal, it acts really similarly to the 80-inch Evo that I had in it previously as far as how tame it is. But when you don't want it to be tame, it's an absolute monster. All the power that you could want is there. So I really like that about it. I didn't lose anything as far as how smooth the ride is. Vibrations aren't worse. Nothing like that. I mean, there's absolutely, at least in my experience here, no cons and all pros to putting this motor in. And the oil lines, the way you can run the oil lines here now is much cleaner. I realize that a Carlini torque arm probably isn't necessary, but adding that, it just looks awesome to me. And the reason for adding it obviously was with the extra torque of the motor. I didn't want to put any extra strain on the primary, especially for an 87. It's about the rarest of the primaries, or one of the rarest of the primaries, the inner primaries, I mean. So it can be real hard to find. So I take extra precautions to make sure that I don't damage mine. So there were no issues putting it in. Everything went the way it should. I had a couple of leaks. Like, look down there, that's not a leak. That's because it just rained and the concrete's drying up. There are no leaks now. Had a couple of leaks, but that was just, not doing my due diligence, making sure everything was tightened up, but, go through that. And that was, like my own mechanical ability. Oil lines, I didn't do a good enough job tightening up, with the new fittings, because I routed everything underneath that I could. But other than that, other than some learnings of my own, this thing's fantastic. Lots of power, very smooth, sounds great. The one issue that I have is this is going to be like a carb tuning thing, I'm thinking, but it really takes me kind of cranking on the throttle to get this thing to turn over, which I think is probably odd, and I think that's going to be a pilot jet thing, which is fine. I can't remember the numbers on the jets, and I'm sorry for that. I should have looked it up, but whatever it came stock, I bumped up the pilot and the main jet, both one size. And again, I apologize on what those were, but maybe I'll put that down in the comments or something, because maybe, you know, somebody might be interested. But if you have any hesitance about the S&S V111, I would say that it's been great so far in my experience. There have been no cons, all pros, and if you're on the fence about it, I would say go for it. So yeah, that's all I really wanted to talk about was my experience with this motor. I think this really completes this bike with, you know, everything I've done to it. I am not sure if I'm gonna stick with the S&S carburetor or not. I figured I'd run it for a while because it came with it, so why not, right? But I do have that CV that's been modified from Killer Carbs, from Dale's Killer Carbs. But what I'm really thinking about is a Mikuni, so more to come on that. I actually don't really have a reason to swap out the S&S at this point because it's been running good. Like I said, the only, you know, thing that seems a little bit weird to me is I really have to open up the throttle to get this thing to fire. And I don't have a lot of experience with Super E's, so maybe that's just kind of the way they are, but I do find it to be a little bit weird for me. As far as break-in, I follow the break-in procedure as it's written in the manual that they give you. I'm at like 508 miles right now on the bike with this motor in. So it's, you know, break-in's done at 1,000 miles. I just did my oil change. Wasn't too dirty. It was pretty good looking, which is a good sign. And so for the last 500 miles of the break-in period, you pretty much just run it, and so that's what I'm gonna do. This super stock ignition, it limits your revs based on hours ridden, and I think it maxes you out at 6,300 RPMs after 100 hours, and then steps up before that point. So I think I can get to like 5,500 RPMs right now. And yeah, man, it's really great. It's been really awesome. I'm glad I did it. Glad I didn't wait a year, because I kind of don't want to ride one with an 80-inch anymore. You know, this is now I don't ever want to go back to it. So I'm glad I did it. Worked out for me. You know, so if you're thinking about it, I know that you do hear some things, but I think, you know, for every one time you hear a complaint, there's 99 other satisfied people and completely happy out there. You know, not many people are outspoken if things are working out. So I just wanted to kind of put out a positive experience out there, and hope it helps you on your FXR journey. Take care.